Perfect.
Let me see if I need to. Oh, there I am. I'm on the big full screen now. Okay.
I know. I pinned you there because I think everybody's here for you. They're not here for me. So.
Don't be so dang hard on yourself. Who knows?
And don't, this might not be a big show, but I'm very excited to. I think your personality definitely fills enough of the room here that it's like you're here with us. So,
Yes. Blown up extra large.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who haven't finished the book, because I want to stay as spoiler-free for Barrier Gaze tonight as possible, just because we are doing a roundtable discussion for it at the end of the month, where we're all going to chat. But for people in the chat, because now we have a sizable following on there now. Can you give us a quick rundown of Barrier Gaze, just so that everybody knows when we start asking some of the more nitty-gritty questions that they know what we're talking about?
Oh, yes. Well, okay. So Barrier Gaze is the story of a screenwriter, Misha, who is asked by the VP of television to kill off his gay characters. He refuses and then begins to get stalked by some of his former horror creations. And I always have this problem where I tend to write in a sort of almost a mystery format as well as horror. I like to dole out information slowly, and I would say that my sort of blurbs of my books, especially my queer horror novels, the traditionally published one, rarely give away what the plot actually is. They're really just the first act. So it's very hard to describe my stories without really getting into spoiler territory. That's the hardest part, honestly.
Which, I mean, if we touch on a few things, as long as we don't, spoil the huge, big plot points, I think we'll be well covered. Oh, hold on. I've got multiple people to admit to the call. They keep coming, Chuck.
Okay.
All right.
Coming in rows. The Buckaroos have arrived.
I love that. I feel like anywhere you go, anything you do, you've got so many folks that are following you. So,
Buckaroos, that is true.
So for folks who probably aren't aware, or maybe not aware, I would say they probably are aware if they're here with you or with us today, Chuck. But you got your start in the indie publishing space, and now you're a New York Times bestselling author. Is that correct?
That is actually, not to be what's the word, pedantic. That is actually technically incorrect on both accounts.
USA Today?
USA Today bestseller, and was never indie published, self-published. I guess if you could consider that. I would say that self-published. I would say that's different from indie publishing personally, but as I said, that might be a little nitpicky.
No, it's you you're cleared up. It's you. You were talking about your career, so you know it better than I do. But your Tingleverse, since everything is connected, there is a lot of deep Tingle lore. If folks aren't aware, go scrub through the internet. There's a lot of it. But you went from your self-publishing to, which you still do, frequently. I mean, you are maybe one of the busiest people I think in the industry.
I try to do a book a week. I try to do a Tingler a week, and then when I'm on tour, that falters a bit, and it's about a book every 2 weeks. But or a release of some kind. So if it's not a whole new Tingler, at least it's like an audio book or something. At least one a week.
So the question I was getting to is, how has this now, I wouldn't say transition to traditional publishing, because you're doing both. How has that, shaped the trajectory or changed how you're, going about your career?
Oh, well, by signing my deal with Tor and I guess Macmillan Nightfire, it's all the same thing, actually. Many different names for the same thing. But I was very clear that, it was important to me to keep making Tinglers. And so, really, it's just two things that work in tandem. I think my schedule is going to be a new queer horror novel through Nightfire once a year. And then in the meantime, I can write as many Tinglers as I want. And I'm still pretty good at keeping up with the Tingler a week schedule when I'm not on tour. So, it's pretty, I do write a lot. So because I write a lot, it's not too hard to keep up with, actually.
What is the current Tingler count at? If do you know off
Oh,
the top
that's
of
a
your head?
good. I don't know. I believe it's around 350. There's a Buckaroo who is has a Tumblr. Think their Tumblr name is Power Handmaiden, and it is they are doing a Tingler a day, like reading and reviewing one Tingler a day every day this year. It started on January 1st, and I believe that they will make it all the way to December 31st. And it's been very fascinating. And I think at least 365 Tinglers because I think there's one for every day, actually.
And I mean, if you're writing, one a week or one every 2 weeks, I mean, they're gonna be hard pressed to catch up. So
Yes, it's true. But I've been so busy with, my book tour was enormous. I was gone for a little over a month. So that's time when that takes a lot out of me. It's a very energetic show, a lot of running around, and so I'm falling a bit behind. And then I am also right now editing a horror novel, and so I'm falling behind on my Tinglers. But I'll once I'm done with this edit, I will probably send it off, and then I'm get back into the Tingler trenches.
amazing. I have followed you for quite a while before Camp Damascus, and just seeing you hit this new level of becoming a household name. For the longest time, it's like you were kind of mentioned in the shadows of the internet of like this mysterious man that writes these books that maybe non-conventional but have all this heart to them.
Yes.
And now it's like I can't go to any bookstore without if I say something about you or I see your book on the dang shelf. So
Yes.
love that.
Now I'm on the lips of every suburban household's nightly dinner discussion, breaking into the mainstream.
This is the future the liberals want.
Yes, it is.
So now that we got the big general questions out of the way, I want to be a little selfish before we get into some of the more pointed questions about you, Chuck, or about Barrier Gaze, and want to jump to something a little more personal since
Yes.
all of your work, your whole image, persona, mission, everything that you've been working on. It's been important to me as I move through the world as a neurodivergent adult and someone who grew up deeply religious. Camp Damascus, spoke a lot of things out there, traumas and things, and then going through this transformative journey with my own identity, sexuality, all that. First, I want to thank you because being who you are, and you're such this beacon of love and positivity. You have love is real right there on your forehead. It's you say it all the time. It's real, it's true. And so I want to say thank you. How has your
Very
writing,
kind. Thank you.
as somebody who I know is also on the spectrum, how has that shaped your style and your voice? And then how has that come through with, I know I saw a post you talked about edits and some things like that. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Okay. So, starting out, my neurodivergence and being on the autism spectrum is something that I didn't talk about too much for a lot of reasons, and I think the main one was that I'm very neurotypically passing. I was diagnosed when I was about 22, and but I still kind of like am able to take any of my spins or anything like that and hold them off. My body takes the toll from that, but during that time, you would probably never know that I was anything but a neurotypical buckaroo. And because I believe that my autism has been a joyful, productive, wonderful part of my life that I'm proud of, for a time you would only hear stories about sort of like this autistic tragedy. Times have actually changed very quick, but very early on, that's the only thing. Buckaroos would get diagnosed. It was like the end of the dang world, all this talk of a dang cure and all these things. And I just always thought, well, what right do I have if all these buckaroos are having such a hard time coming in here, kicking open the door, and speaking with so much joy? But what I realized is that other voice is important. It is a spectrum after all. It is not a monolith of experience, and we need a representation of all different types of this experience. So, when I was younger, when I was diagnosed, I was excited because I knew that my hero, David Byrne from the Talking Heads, was also on the spectrum. And so I just thought, whoa, this is so cool. This is like the dang coolest thing that's ever dang happened. And I know that's a rare reaction to think suddenly I was in the cool kids club. But it was my genuine reaction. And I just thought, well, maybe I should talk about my autism more so that I can do what David Byrne did for me, and that some young buckaroos finding this out about themselves could look up and see Chuck and think, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, now I'm in the same club as Chuck. So I just eventually realized, there is plenty of space for all kinds of autistic stories. Stories of trauma and stories of joy. And so that's kind of why I talk about it more and kind of let it be involved in my writing. And I also see the same goes for bisexuality, and kind of barrier gaze in general is essentially me processing this exact thing that we're talking about more in the sexuality sense, but still the importance of representation of all kinds.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's been huge for me seeing you talk about it more, and, in reading, both of your, traditionally published novels. Obviously, you speak a lot about, everything in all of the tinglers and things like that. But to see it, to have it really hit you in the face every time you go in a bookstore and say, hey, they're like me, every time that I see your books. And then, as I've, in writing and doing things on my own, seeing you talk about, not struggles, but this is how I talk and how how my writing voice comes out. And that doesn't make it incorrect because of the experience I have. It's just, this is me on paper.
Yes, I find writing, interestingly, to be there's certain rules in writing where other forms of media, other forms of artistic expression have a space carved out for essentially punk rock. I mean, music is the most obvious one, but there is this in visual art as well, painting and things. I like to give the example, if you play your song a little too fast, if it's a little out of key, there's some missed notes and it's sloppy, everyone doesn't say that's a bad song. They say, wow, what a great punk song. If you write a book that's this kind of primal thing that you write in 24 hours really fast, put it out with spelling errors and all, just like express it without any edits or anything, everyone doesn't say, oh, that's punk writing. They say, oh, that's wrong and bad and you can't do that. I definitely loudly and proudly say my Tinglers are punk rock writing, just because it's something that I haven't really seen done before. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't tend to care about stuff like that. But part of that is just there's certain things about the way my mind works that I think if I went to a traditional English school kind of education writing degree, I would be asked to sand that off of my writing style. And to be honest, I refuse to do that. That is part of my brain. It is part of my autistic brain. And as a writing punk rocker, I am just not interested in the rules in that way. And I mean, it seems to have worked out pretty well for me so far.
Hopefully, folks will take a page from your book on, in the publishing world and things like that to see, things like Bury Your Gaze or Camp Damascus, hit that USA Today bestseller list, that, maybe it's, maybe have their hearts and minds changed, that maybe it's not a right or wrong way to do it. It's just, your
Yes.
way.
Well, I hope that artists can listen when I say these things. I say these things that you're really not supposed to say as a writer. And the reason I do that is because my path to creation is unconventional. It's not really the traditional advice. In fact, I kind of reject a lot of the traditional advice. And I don't say that just to like piss off some buckaroos or anything, or say I'm different. I just want folks to know, who are writers and creators themselves, that there is no wrong way to create your art. In fact, a lot of artistic progress, a lot of entirely new genres are created when someone is brave enough to come along and say, this is just my process. This is just how I do it. It comes out this way, and that's what art's about. And I just tend to think that, unlike any other mediums, writing is very strict about how you are supposed to talk about it, how you're supposed to write, and the balance of show versus tell, whether you let the character lead or something else. And I kind of just say, I've found my own version of that, and I'm going to stick to that. And that's fine with me. And if you don't want to do it, then you can heck off. And if you do want to do it, that's fine too. Just, there's no right or wrong way to be an artist like that. And I hope young writers realize that and can look at my success and think, oh yeah, I guess that's kind of true. You can trot your own path.
I mean, as a non-young writer, I guess that would be an old writer. I guess I'm taking that to heart and everything that I've been doing, because it really has been transformative since reading. I read Camp Damascus, for review, and read that I think twice, and then it was really reading Bury Your Gaze when we got the arc that this one definitely in that regard resonated even more. Camp Damascus got that religious trauma, and really hit on that. But Bury Your Gaze, I think, because it is such a meta commentary on, it's a meta commentary on horror as a genre about Hollywood, but I think that it transcends those two things and just is about art and writing and all of those things you talked about. So
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about your book without talking about your book, so let's talk about your book. It is that meta commentary. How did you settle on specifically tackling Hollywood the way you did through Misha's eyes?
The way that I come up with ideas, I'm very drawn to high concept, which a lot of buckaroos actually don't, incorrectly they think that's the opposite of what it means. You'll see a lot of folks say, oh, high concept, like very artsy with just like this kind of ethereal kind of thing. It's actually, high concept is the opposite. It's basically an idea or a log line that you can just pitch on the idea alone, that's just very poppy in itself and would sell without a big name attached. In screenwriting, that's what it is. Like something like I always think of this as the example, even though it's a silly movie, but it's very high concept. Liar, Liar is the movie of a lawyer who can't lie for 24 hours. That is like the epitome of a high concept thing. You can just pitch it. Everyone knows it within a sentence. You're off and running. So I love high concept ideas. I think that if I'm going to write a queer horror novel, which is now my novel length work, It needs to be high concept. And then I have a lot of these, and then I have a lot of things that I want to say, things that are important to my heart in my daily life that I'm kind of trotting around, running into, ideas that mean a lot to me, something in the news, something that I've been feeling. Those are trotting around as well. And then eventually they'll crash together, and I'll realize, oh, this thing that means a lot to me that I really want to say would work perfect if I said it through this idea. And once those crash together, that's when I know that I have a book that I think is worth writing. One of the things that I talked about earlier is things you're not supposed to say as a writer. If anyone asks you, do you write with plot first or characters first? You're supposed to say characters, just so everyone knows that's what you're taught. I don't write either of them first. I write message first. It's like I have to give the reader something, give the audience something, and that's going to be a message. And that is kind of my North Star while writing. So when my ideas crashed together for Bury Your Gaze, it kind of, there were a lot of things on my mind, and I had actually had a kind of the idea for this story for a while, and suddenly I thought, okay, that's the one I want to do next.
Again, another one of those things that when you say it, and like that, it resonates with me as somebody who, when I write something, I struggle. Like, I hear, big authors talk about, character writing and all this stuff, and characters are always the thing that come last for me. But it's those concepts of, oh, I'm going to focus in on, grief or this, or, taking that kind of idea and taking it maybe a little more granular and saying, I'm going to, put it against this backdrop of grief in the confines of a relationship or in the confines of this. And so that's fascinating that's how you, because I don't think reading Bury Your Gaze, I would have anticipated that's how you came up with this one, because where this one goes and all the things in it, for being high concept, like there's a lot going on.
Yes. Well, I always start there, but I find I think this is part of my autistic way. And actually, before I get into this, I should reiterate too that if you write character first, that's fine. Like me writing message first is fine, and so is writing character first. It's actually pretty good advice for beginning writers, but it's just not what I do. And any other way is fine. But what I was going to say about this one is I think it has to do with my autistic way, where I do start with the high concept ideas, but I'm so organized. Part of the way that my spectrum functions is just order. I really need things to like have a system. It's the same system, and that's how I process things over and over again, very methodically, almost mechanically in some ways. And so basically, I start there with this high concept idea, but once you put those ideas into the real world and look at them very realistically, which is generally how I do it, you start to uncover some very strange details. That one little high concept what if question very quickly becomes just all kinds of interesting things that you uncover. And I think that's just from having a mind that's interested in realism. Like, what would it really be like if this happens? So I kind of spin it off in that direction.
So when you are kind of tackling it in that mechanical way, do you then, once you get that kind of idea or that message, do you then kind of mechanically plot the, the arc of the story out or do you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and
I think I actually go message first. I have to really believe in the message and know what the gift I'm going to give a reader, how they're going to feel at the end of, oh, thank you for explaining your thoughts on that. Thank you for giving me perspective on that. Sometimes the gift can just be entertainment, but I like to kind of have it be that message. And then actually probably I do a plot next, where I plot it out. I'm pretty methodical with plot. I actually I do screenplay beats, which is why a lot of my novels are very fast paced and cinematic. Is because I don't use novel plotting. I use screenplay plotting, which is very specific to a 2 hour film, and so I will plot it out as in screenplay kind of plot beats, and then I think of who are the characters that would most drive this idea, who can have the most change from this, who's the most interesting person to drop into this situation. So I guess I actually go kind of message, plot, and then character. All three are very important. I think you really, not you, me, I can't speak for anyone else. I really want all three of them to be functioning together, but the order that I figure them out is actually that direction.
Sorry, I'm fumbling with the mute and unmute button.
That's okay.
So what was your pitch and your message for Bury Your Gaze? What was that you started with?
There were a couple. I think that really it's a story about ultimately about the importance of human creation. I think really it was me standing up for fan fiction, for the idea of fandom, and that I'm very anti-gatekeeper, and there is a lot of gatekeeping in like the highbrow versus lowbrow art, and this idea that like loving television shows, loving films, being nostalgic for these things is bad and wrong. So really, I wanted it to be a celebration of like fandom, and to really say this is valid art. I wanted it to, like I said, human creation, because there's stuff going on with AI art right now, and so I wanted to just really talk about the importance of processing trauma through art, and everything that I said before about how you can process trauma, but you can also process joy, and those are both valid. And then lastly, I actually had for a long time, when I've been writing Tinglers, they were originally Buckaroo on Buckaroo, and I've branched out. There's lesbian Tinglers, trans Tinglers, bi Tinglers, and there's asexual Tinglers. And when I was writing asexual Tinglers, as a queer Buckaroo myself, I kind of think that as queer artists, we're welcome to kind of dabble in the other letters, but as guests in a house, you want to be a good house guest. You want to talk to buckaroos. So I was talking to a lot of ace buckaroos and arrow buckaroos, and kind of saying, hey, I want to write these not pounded by tinglers, because all of the asexual buckaroos were asking for them. They said, we want to see ourselves in the Tingleverse. And I said, sure, but let's talk and make sure that I do it right. So within those talks, I really found that asexual, aromantic buckaroos are really given a lot of grief in the queer community. There's so much gatekeeping there, and it was so horrible. And they were so kind to me when working on my asexual tinglers that I just thought, this is not right. And I kind of want to give a gift to this community back for being so welcoming to me. So part of the plotting of Bury Your Gaze, I knew that I wanted to do a novel that was a big statement where, because of the plot, unequivocally, you could read it and think asexuals are valid queer buckaroos, and that you read it and you think, wow, Chuck really believes in that and really supports asexual buckaroos. I wanted to give a sort of hero moment to that community that I think just takes a lot of harm. And so part of the plot of Bury Your Gaze was finding a way to kind of weave that in as sort of a gift back.
And it seems like you also did that same thing with, I know bi buckaroos often get the same kind of flag, but definitely not the same. But, in the same way, in culture, there's the, bi erasure and everything.
Yes. Well, every letter of the queer experience has kind of their own thing, their own like battles within the community. Like I said, it's like a neighborhood, and we all get to trot to each other's houses. But you want to be a good guest. I just find that when you start kind of trying to like talk about who has it worse, who has it better, and all these things, it just becomes kind of unproductive, and it's not really my style. And so that I kind of just wanted to fight against. And I will also say, I tend to think of my horror novels. They are queer horror, and generally they function as like broad queer horror, where any queer buckaroo will enjoy it. Also, any not queer buckaroo will enjoy it, I think. But really, it's written for my queer buckaroos. But they tend to have kind of little side missions of someone else that I'm proving love to, like Camp Damascus. It's a queer horror story, but also there's a bit of a side mission for my fellow autistic buckaroos where we're going to prove a little love there. I think that kind of the side mission of Barrier Gaze is kind of like a little proving love to my asexual buckaroos as a little treat there. And then I will say Lucky Day, which is the next book that was just announced, my next queer horror novel, I think is actually very much the side mission is the bisexual buckaroos. It's focused on bisexual eraser a little bit. So yeah, I tend to each one have this little thing where I say, all right, you letter on this part of the community. Let's write a little treat for you.
I love that. I love that, everybody in the, in the family is going to get a little slice of, Chuck proving that love is real. And
essentially, yeah, make sure we're going to cover everyone.
Good. So I do have maybe a more specific question talking about Misha and all of these, movies that Misha has written that then, these monsters or creations of theirs are coming back. The crux of the plot, trying to, kill him. Which one is your favorite that you put in there? But then more importantly, were there any creations? Do you have like deep Misha lore of other films that didn't make the page?
Yeah, well, okay, there's a few things. I will say it's very hard to decide a favorite. I think that my favorite is Mrs. Y. I don't know how many buckaroos listening have read this, but I did a little poll on Tumblr actually, and Mrs. Y won. She's very fun, very scary. My favorite to write was probably The Smoker. And to go along with kind of the lore, the book is, when Nightfire is very good with, like, I kind of can write whatever books I want. I have a great editor. And sometimes being a great editor is just saying, listen, you're kind of a specific voice. We're not going to mess with you that much. So I really don't have to make any changes to any of my books, but my editor, Kelly, is very, very good. So a lot of the time I want to make her changes, and there generally aren't very many at all. The one big change I will say in Barrier Gaze is there was a chapter near the end where it was more focused on a character called the Bride. And for a various number of reasons, mostly because it fell into a specific trope that I don't like, we removed it. And because I kind of felt like if we are doing this book called Barrier Gaze, where we turn a bunch of tropes on its head and criticize the Barrier Gaze trope, I don't want to do another really obvious trope in that same book. I always had a problem with the chapter, and it finally was kind of the best decision to just take it out.
Very interesting. I mean, I know all the Nightfire folks over there are just the best. They're, we've done, I think most of our live streams that we've done here in the last year, I would say over half of them have been Nightfire Buckaroos. We talked to, Nat Cassidy and Liz and CJ and Johnny Compton, and
yes, these are all my buds now. There's an interesting thing that happens. I didn't really realize this before. starting with authors on the same imprint, you kind of become buds. It's like a little ragtag bunch of buckaroos that ends up hanging out all the time. So it's very fun.
That's what I just got to spend the weekend with Phil Fracassi in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a little festival for him that a friend of mine put together. And, we were talking Nightfire Buckaroos, literally all
he's
weekend.
Great. We are buds as well. Yes, he's great.
So if it's all right with you, Chuck, I would like to open this up because we've got, people in the room here. And then if anybody in the chat wants to type in the chat any questions for Chuck, is that all right with you?
Oh, yeah. Let's heckin' try.
Absolutely. If you have a question and you're on the stream, if you want to drop it in the chat. Anybody else in here? Does anybody have a question they want to? I have a notoriously quiet group, so we might have to lean on the internet. But
that's okay.
Go ahead.
My question was, how do you deal with, talking about being on the spectrum, autistic burnout? You suffer from that? Do you balance? Does that make room in your writing schedule for that?
Good question. I could hear that from here. How do I deal with kind of autistic burnout? Actually, funny enough, all of this is how I deal with autistic burnout. It is essentially my stim. I suffered from chronic pain for many years in my life. I would go to the hospital. Doctors did not know what was going on. Honestly, I thought that I would either live on painkillers my entire life or not live at all. It got that bad to where I was just in pain every single day. And when I started to write as Chuck, it started and kind of appear like this and let my what you would call your id, I guess, but in the terms of my autism, kind of my neurodivergent part that is masked all the time, letting this part of me come out and just kind of be free, started to make my pain go away. So, really, this is a thank you to everyone listening, everyone watching. You have created this space for me, the space within this 1 foot by 1 foot pink bag, but also the space of a bookstore or a virtual chat room. So thank you, because you have literally saved my life. Over time, the more that I express myself like this, write my tinglers, do these appearances, just exist as Chuck in this way, the more my pain goes away. And at this point, I am pretty much entirely pain-free. So yeah, you have really saved my life. And I would say that, the autistic burnout that I feel is from when I'm not doing this. And this is kind of how I deal with it. This is how I let off the steam.
Theo, you had a question?
Yeah. Hi, Chuck. So, hi. I saw you in Portland many years ago, and it was a really great podcast. And it was with a friend of mine who we actually met through your Tinglers, and they passed away about a month later from an aneurysm.
Wow.
So
I'm sorry.
That was the last time we saw each other. So I really was like, I know that you like how you connect people, and I just wanted you to know that you were very important to that person. So anyways, my question totally different. So you talk about how you write very cinematically and as a more script writing kind of style. So are you looking to do a production deal or development deal to take these 2 horror novels or the series you have going and turn it into an anthology type thing or some kind of visual, production?
Yeah, I would love if any of my work was adapted. I think even my pre-Nightfire horror novella Straight would be an amazing film. I think Camp Damascus would be a great film. I think Bury Your Gaze would be a good film. It is just, I think it's a matter of time because I do have, film and a film agent who works on that type of thing. There are a couple of buckaroos that, I can't say too much, but Camp Damascus has been talked about in this way, in a pretty serious way. So you never know what could happen. I will say that I do like screenplays as a art form as well, and I am often encouraged by my manager and agents and things to say, Chuck, you should write a dang screenplay. And I say, that's a great idea. I'd love to do that. And then whenever I come up with an idea that I really love, I always end up saying, oh, but that would maybe make a better novel. And then I just write another dang horror novel. So I would love to see that in the future. Obviously, like I said, I write cinematically, so that's how I see it in my head. But it has yet to happen. But I think it could be around the corner on this timeline someday.
I sure would like it to be on this timeline. I'd hate to miss it. I know Ozzy. Ozzy had a question.
Okay, I see it popping up in the thing. Okay, I'm reading it now.
So I guess you always talk about Christianity and about your, or sorry, no, not Christianity. I can't read from this distance.
We just took a hard turn. Yes, I think it says certainty. Yes.
Yeah.
I think I can read it. I'll read it aloud. You always talk with certainty about your masking. Considering us neurodivergent peeps are often rather bad at judging whether others can tell we're different. How do you know you're, quote, passing in your non-Chuck part of life? That's a very good question. I think, a lot of autistic buckaroos are familiar with something that has not, honestly, it's changing, fortunately, but the autistic classic of, oh, I'm on the spectrum, and then someone says, no, you're not. That's the old standby. I think a lot of autistic buckaroos get that. I get it a lot. So really, I'm just using the evidence of that. I have literally asked folks, which I think is more welcome. And I would say that anyone who is very close, I'm going to say like best buckaroos, family, like literal family, say, yes, we can see that, we know that. It would mostly be a kind of like more peripheral bugs, or just someone that I meet on the street. And yes, then they say, well, I don't know about that. I don't believe you. You're not autistic. And I say, I beg to differ. And so does my old dang therapist.
Yeah, that's a hard one when people will try very much to your face to say, no, you're not. It's like, well, I'm pretty sure I might know.
That used to be a very big thing. It still is. That's a big issue. But I will say that, like, talking about it, like me saying this is not an original thing, original thought. Like I said, very common to the autistic experience. And I do kind of see more folks realizing, oh, that's not exactly the kindest reaction.
I have a question here in the room with us.
Just curious what you're currently reading and loving. As Chapel Rome's hero Sasha and Colby would say, who's your favorite author?
Oh, this is great. So here's an interesting thing. Speaking of things you're never supposed to say as a writer, here I will hit you with another one. I don't read very much. I never have. I write all the time. Can you repeat the question? The question was, yes. Who am I reading right now, and kind of like favorite authors and that type of thing. So you're not supposed to say that. Pretty much every rule book of writing says the key to writing is reading all the time. I personally, all of my influences are other types of art, filmmakers, visual artists, musicians, performance artists, and I don't read that all that much. But I will say, well, I write all the time. And also part of that writing, I think, is kind of my brain. I don't know if this is an autistic thing, but when I read, or when I try to read, I'll get like four pages will go by, and suddenly I'll think, I didn't retain any of that. I was thinking about what I would do if I was writing this. So I kind of drift off in this creation land. Very hard for me to focus. Audiobooks have been a blessing, but that's kind of a long answer to say, for not reading that much in my earlier life, I kind of read all the time now because I've made a bunch of buds who are authors. So now I'm friends with all these authors and I read their books and I think, whoa, this is pretty dang good. It's very funny going to dang publishing dinners and stuff because everyone in the class say, oh, do you know who that is? That's this author. And I have no idea who that is. I don't know any authors. It is all news to me. But for recommendations, honestly, they're all going to be my buds. But I do think that they're amazing. And I will say that the best thing that I have read in a long time that I love is from my very good bud, CJ Lead, American Rapture, which is not out yet, but it's coming soon. You can pre-order it. And I just think it's so amazing. So yes, that is like kind of one of my most recent reads was that.
CJ is also a bud of the bookstore, and I have gotten to read American Rapture, and I know CJ, I think, is planning on, we're going to do one of these with CJ, I think in November. We haven't gotten it on the books yet, but very excited. We did an event going into Stoker Con that we called the Road to Stoker Con, and we talked
yes, I remember that, yes.
We talked with Sadie Hartman, and that was when we got to talk to Johnny, and that was the first time I got to talk to CJ outside of Instagram and the various ways that us in the horror community interact with y'all, and so we're excited to have her back on her own for that. So
yes,
I know we had another person in the chat. The Ricky Shrimps wanted to ask a question. And I don't know if they want to drop in the chat or if they were going to, I don't know if shrimps speak English, but.
No, I was going to say it out loud. Thank you. Thanks for the announcement. Hi, Chuck. Thanks for doing this. And I wanted to ask a question about the cover. I know, different books and authors have different amounts of involvement, but I think the cover for Bury Your Gaze is beautiful, and also it ties in into the story as like a poster. And so I was just wondering, like, if you had any specific inspirations for it, and like the process of like designing it and stuff.
Yes. Okay. So Nightfire, really, like I said, they kind of let me do whatever I dang want. It is very, very cool to have such a supportive kind of team of buckaroos. And the way that we do covers is basically when it's time for that discussion to happen, I make a mood board. It's a giant file the size of like a computer wallpaper with other covers, movie posters, different kind of like colors or fonts or things. And then on it, I will generally write like the themes of the book, the imagery, and kind of like the vibe of the book. And then I will send that to my editor, Kelly. And then she will look it over and say, okay, if we want to do this, here's some artists. Which one of these artists do you like? And then I'll kind of look at their portfolio and I say, let's do that one. And then they send my mood board to the artist, and then the artist sends generally like a couple of options back. And then I say, I like that option. And then the cover is made. There's the text over the top, but I'm very, very involved in that, and it's very collaborative. I know there are other authors who kind of just wake up one day and look in their inbox and there's a cover. But for me, no, I do the whole process. We are kind of just starting that process on Lucky Day right now. I'm very excited about the new one because I have a great mood board for it. But yeah, that's how that process goes, and it's very fun. And as far as the cover of Barrier Gaze being in the book, which it is, that's not a spoiler. It's kind of like a little Easter egg for everyone because it is a very self-referential meta book. My big secret is that before it went off to print, I went in and edited in what the cover was. So the cover came first, and I had a spot in the book that was kind of like a blank spot. And then once we decided on the cover before it went to print, I dropped in and wrote a description of the cover. So that's how I managed to do that.
That's incredible. I love that you were like, I have one more thing. Don't start the presses yet. Let me drop this in there.
Well, you know what? Can I say there were two things that happened? The other thing is very funny. There's a conversation in the very first chapter, so it's not really, none of this isn't a spoiler. All this is very, you learn this in the first chapter. There's a conversation about the legal team not allowing Misha to do something, to use someone's real name. And that wasn't in the original book. That happened right before it went to presses because originally the character of Chris Oak was going to be directly named as a certain Chris who has a different type of tree as their name. And that was in the original book. And this was all okayed by the legal team at Macmillan and everything. They said, yeah, you can do that. And then when they actually read the book and what that character does in the book, they said, there is no way you are allowed to use this person's real name. So then it was changed to Chris Oak. And to kind of keep with the meta thing, I then added a conversation in the beginning about Misha needing to use a slightly different name for one of his things. So that I think it's very funny because there was a little bit of a legal battle about that.
I know Casey raised their hand in the chat. Casey, are you there?
Okay, I can read this. Let's see. Casey says, as an older queer, I feel like online spaces have changed a lot of ways for queer people in your time publishing and existing online. In what ways have they changed for you in the better, and or perhaps in what ways has it become more difficult? Let's see, queer spaces changing online. You know, I am such an outsider, both in my art and just the way that I exist. I don't feel like I have felt the general change so much as I felt my own change, and it's less about my queerness and just about every part of me, which is that, you know, I have been kind of online posting and stuff for almost a decade now, and I was really not taken at face value. I was really not taken seriously for a very long time. The irony poisoning that has seeped into the internet is very hard to, the anti-venom is working its way through, but it takes some time. There is severe irony poisoning from like early internet message boards. So the idea that I am not playing a character, which I am not, this is not some kind of a bit or something, is very hard for a lot of sort of terminally online buckaroos to accept. And so for a very long time in my early internet days, it was essentially impossible for anyone to actually see what I did as valid art. But, you know, I've been doing it long enough. And if you are an artist yourself and you come up against this, you know, if you create from your heart long enough, the timeline will eventually bend to you, and you don't have to bend to the timeline. And so that's kind of what happened. Is I feel like I have really changed the perception of a certain type of art, a certain type of artist and presentation, because I've been doing it for so long. But it was a hard road because no one would ever take me seriously.
We had Raven wanted to ask a question. They might be.
Hi.
Hello, Raven.
I just wanted to ask, with Bury Your Gaze, it has a lot of, I guess, references and connections to other media, things like Supernatural and The 100 and The X-Files. Was there like a research phase for you, or was this all stuff that you already had familiarity with?
I always research kind of quite a bit, but a lot of the time those are like interviews. There's buckaroos that I will sit down with and kind of do talk to, record a phone call. I will say for instance, for Camp Damascus, I have a bud who was kind of grew up in an actual cult that I will not name, but one that is kind of known. So I did a very recorded a long interview with them. For Bury Your Gaze, I actually know a lot of this stuff. As a creator, I have said this before, but I am known in some way, not to be too specific, outside of all this. To some buckaroos. So I understand various creative fields and have a lot of, insight there that requires not that much research in this. But I did talk to a bud who is a pretty actually well-known bud that I will not name specifically about some of the things in this. So honestly, it's more like kind of direct interviews. Is generally what I like to do. I'm working on a book now that has to do with a kind of like a black market body stealer, like a grave robber. So I did like a 2-hour interview with like a funeral director. So there's like all kinds of stuff that I like to do like that. But generally, it's like one-on-one personal interviews.
Chuck, we didn't talk beforehand about how much time we had together. I know generally I plan on at least an hour. If folks have more questions, we can do that. I didn't know. I want to be respectful of your time.
Let's do a couple. We can do a couple more questions.
Okay, perfect. Does anybody else in the room have questions? Felicia.
I started listening to the audio for Bury Your Gaze, and I heard some voices that I recognized, specifically Stephen Graham Jones as like a store clerk. And then I realized you had a lot of your fellow horror authors lending their voices to the audiobook. And I was wondering if that was your choice or how do you come up with that?
Yes, that was my choice. So like I said, I have a bunch of author buds now. So it was pretty easy to cast. I kind of just wrote everybody some emails and said, you want to get a couple lines for my audiobook? The purpose behind it was so there are screenplay sections of the book, and they are meant to kind of be confusing at first, and they lead to a bit of a twist. And there is a very specific reason why these certain sections are screenplays that in the text of the book, I think it reveals itself in a kind of fun meta way through the formatting itself, which I thought was so exciting to think, we're telling a story through the formatting of this book. How exciting, cool, interesting. But then when it came to audiobook, I thought, well, how the heck are we gonna do that? And so I thought, well, if it's not a screenplay, then let's try to do it as a radio play. And I asked the audiobook buckaroos, and they said that's a great idea. We can get some of our buckaroos to do it. And I said, well, how about because this book is already so self-referential and so meta, Instead of like a traditional voice actor, since it's only a couple of lines, let's get other authors to do it, other horror authors. That would be very fun and self-referential. So that's what we did. That's kind of how it came about.
Did anybody else in the chat have questions? Or in the room with us? Oh, I muted. Oops. Mike, I have a question. With choosing those and informing these horror buds that you've made in the genre, we've talked that there's a lot of the Nightfire buckaroos that have really been welcoming as they brought you on and into the fold with Nightfire. How did you end up connecting with some of these authors from other publishers and other imprints and outside of that sphere?
Well, a lot of them, maybe I've done a book event or a convention. It's along with Nightfire, you just kind of get to know buckaroos. Like TJ Klune is, well, I think TJ's on tour, so that would be one. Stephen Graham Jones is not right now, but we were buds. I think, yeah, I don't know. It just, you kind of get to know everybody. I will say I knew everyone that I wanted to reach out to, but I didn't necessarily have a part for everyone. There were only a couple of specific things I wanted. As I said, CJ Lead is a bud of mine, and I said, okay, I want CJ to be the character of the bride, because there's just something. I was like, there's something about your voice that's going to be really perfect for this. So that was kind of the only specific casting. And then my bud Georgia Bird, who, if you've ever listened to my erotica tinglers, she does all of the Tingleverse, like Ladybug on Ladybug erotica. And so I thought it's going to be a really fun meta treat for the buckaroos who've trotted over from the erotica Tingleverse. If Georgia Bird just does like one line, I'm pretty sure she's just the navigation system of the car. So I thought that was another one that I thought, okay, we just got to get you in there for one little thing.
If nobody else is going to ask a question too, my question is very practical. Of how many masks do you have?
Oh, I have about, it depends. Sometimes I'll retire them if they've been washed too much and get faded. I think like at any one time, probably 8 to 10. But I also have a mask underneath right here. You can see this white. I have probably 15 or 20 of those, because you can wear the bag multiple times. Like on a tour, if there's one that I really like the fit, I'll just keep wearing it and I steam it every time, but then I change the mask underneath. So it's a whole thing. And then I'll also say, I talk about meeting these author buds. Author dinners are kind of a thing if you're at a big convention or something. I had one down at the Comic-Con this year, and generally I have a special eating mask that's a giant hole, so I don't get the dang food all over myself at an author dinner. I think what's funny is a lot of folks think, oh, we're on the outside. All these authors are on the inside. They all know what Chuck looks like. Buckaroo. My lawyer, I have meetings with my lawyer wearing this mask. Like when I go into the offices of Macmillan, which I did on this book tour, the big office building in New York, I am wearing this mask at every meeting, at every dinner, all of that stuff. So yes, I have a lot, and some for eating.
Yeah, that's what I think it was when y'all were at Comic-Con, or when you were no, it was at Stoker. I had talked to CJ, and she was like, no, seriously, I have no idea what this man looks like. She's like, it is the craziest thing to be, friends with somebody and, in this sphere. And that she's like, don't think that I'm special because I'm on the inside, because,
Oh, yes.
Well, I think everybody in the room here is now quiet, and I don't think anybody's piping up on chat. And I could keep asking you questions all night, Chuck, but I think if it's okay with you, we can call that a
Yes,
dang.
I've had a great time. Thank you, everyone. This was wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Chuck. This is seriously. I have been, excited for this more than many other author events. Because you were one that I reached out to. That you are a bit of an enigma out there. That I didn't know if I was going to get a yes or if I was going to hear back. And so the fact that the Nightfire folks and you have been so kind. So thank you so much.
Oh yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
We would love, if we ever make it onto your schedule for getting you to, Arkansas, because Arkansas definitely needs some more queer representation and, things like that, we'll keep putting the bug in Nightfire's ear to get you to trot down here to the middle of the
Heck
country
yeah.
with us.
Well, I will be, I have another book coming out next summer, so that means another book tour. So we'll see what happens.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Chuck. And, as I tell everybody that does one of these with us, any future one, if you have, if you want to crash CJ's, talk and pop in and say hello, or, if any of your other Nightfire buds, or if we do another event with Stephen Graham Jones, you are more than welcome anytime.
Oh, yes. I'll keep my eyes peeled.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chuck. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.